So one of my best friends in my play group has a Prosper Tomebound deck, and he approached me recently. Despite his best efforts, he was finding that he was unable to close out games even though he had massive advantages on board. So I flipped through his deck and the problem becomes quickly apparent. He has an entirely value-based deck with absolutely no payoffs. There was no single card where I thought, oh yeah, that's here to close out the game. And sure enough, as I played against him, he had massive turns, churning out treasure and filling his board, only to be met with a reluctant, I guess I just pass? And that there is a really bad feeling. The feeling that you're really doing something to impact the game, only to realize that you're just spinning your wheels, stuck. I'm here to help you fix that problem and also improve your Prosper Tomebound decks. Originally released in Adventure of the Forgotten Realms as a pre-con commander, Prosper very quickly climbed the ranks and now enjoys VIP status. At the time of making this video, he has 15,000 decks on EDH Rec and ranks number 13 out of all commanders. That's right, all commanders. The problem outlined by my friend is not just a singular experience, however. As I scroll through the numerous decks listed online, I find that even those in the thousands of dollar range, most of them, in fact, have a similar issue of having too much of the spin your wheels and generate value function more so than an actual win con. You know, we joke about Cynic all the time, but it's really a problem here. But before we get into the cards that I included in my version of the deck, I have a few housekeeping items that I need to get out of the way. First, there will be two versions of this deck, a budget version and a higher end, higher power deck list available. You're welcome. Second, we need to review a few rulings for those of you just starting out to better understand the commonly missed interactions. And third, you need to subscribe. I make these videos through a lot of effort on my behalf and have a ton of new videos planned that no one has done in the Magic the Gathering YouTube space, so stick around for that. Let's get going. Prosper has two abilities, one that exiles things and another that gives you treasure for casting from exile. First and foremost, at your end step, when you exile a card from your deck, even if Prosper is removed from the battlefield by the time it gets back to your turn, you can still cast the card. I see this question come up all the time in my own play group. Once it's exiled, it's no longer contingent on Prosper being on the battlefield to still cast it. The same is not true, however, for the second ability. If Prosper cannot see the card being cast from exile, aka he's not on the battlefield, no treasure for you. Now, this is because of how the text is structured. Both are triggered abilities, and unless otherwise specified, a card needs to exist on the battlefield or its other appropriate zone to trigger. Prosper, however, needs to be on the battlefield. With all of that out of the way, let's dig into the key includes for my deck list. We're going to start with the payoffs in this episode because I think it's important for the remaining structure and function of our commander deck. Prosper makes an obscene amount of mana. Oh, I exiled a land card. Let me play that from exile and then get an extra treasure just because. Dark Ritual, you mean cast it for free and then suddenly have an influx of mana, etc. You see how this can easily get out of hand for a majority of your deck. All of this mana doesn't really matter, however, unless we have something to do with it, which is why I've included cards like Crackle with Power, Torment of Hailfire, Dance with Calamity, and two brand new includes, which are Call Forth the Tempest and Flaming Tyrannosaurus. Now, these are all big threats with the potential to deal an absurd amount of damage, but will require a high mana investment, which, as we've already established, really shouldn't be an issue for us. Well, that's not very impressive, Kyle. You only have 4 or 5 cards designated as win cons. Oh no, we're just getting started. Since we're making a ton of treasures, sacrificing them, and casting from exile, we need ways to abuse this. Enter Mirkwood Bats, Mayhem Devil, Marionette Master, Keeper of Secrets, and Passionate Archaeologist. All of these have the added benefit of turning our card advantage into incidental damage by just doing what we would have otherwise. The Archaeologist, Keeper of Secrets, and Marionette Master are all deadly, and I've personally seen them end games, and I've used them myself to close out games. Don't sleep on these cards. So we can close games out, I get it, but what's next? With my version of the deck, I wanted it to be a bit more, you know, steal your girl style. Take from your opponents and beat them with their own decks. The new Magic releases have been very kind to Prosper, and with them have been some very exciting new cards for us to abuse. Praetor's Grasp, Ensnared by the Mara, the Ruinous Powers, Stolen Strategy, Dauthi Voidwalker, Draugr Necromancer, Gonti Lord of Luxury, and Plarg and Nasari are all in the same boat of stealing cards. but I wanted to focus on Plarg and Nasari. Now this card was the one that got me really excited in the first place about running a higher percentage of cards that actually take from our opponents more so than exiling from our own deck. The reason being is that Plarg and Nasari are 5 mana. 5 comes before 4, aka we can play Prosper followed by the new combo the next turn. And in the absence of our opponents immediately answering these guys, I think the game quickly folds into our favor. Casting for free and generating incidental treasures is just way too good to pass up. I purposely left the discussion of rituals until we've actually finished breaking down the core concepts of our deck. You see, there really are only certain cards that we want to exile that we actually get excited about. I can't tell you how many times my friend sent his big creature or big spell into exile and he just groans because he would have much preferred just like a land, or even better yet, a ritual. So this is precisely why I'm running as many of the easy to include rituals as possible. Classics like Dark Ritual, but also Cabal Ritual and Seething Song and Mana Geyser, and of course, Jessica's Will. So we're always ecstatic to exile these cards with Prosper or some other exile effect, while Prosper remains on the battlefield. I promise that if you skimp out on the rituals, at least the cheap ones, you will completely regret not including them, especially if we can easily get them on top to abuse our commander's ability. Which is our next section. Arguably, top deck manipulation can fit into any deck, but in particular with Prosper, who cares about what ends up in exile, you will certainly want to be running Sensei's Divining Top and Scroll Rack. Now, these are auto-includes for me. In fact, I think that they were the very first cards that I put into my own deck list because of how important they are. There are 2 other cards that I want to mention, however, in regard to top deck manipulation, although they go about it in a not so straightforward way. First is Bolas's Citadel, which I myself am a self-reported Citadel abuser, and this card is just ridiculous. And in most games, a single turn with this guy easily wins you the game. In our case, the Citadel can be easily cast due to the mana acceleration, and then can pump cards off the top until we either win or we hit our second land, which in that case, we just exile it with Prosper at the end step and then further funds our addictive gameplay experience. Second is a little unknown card called Ubamask. Now, this card tends to piss people off, pardon my French. Basically, if any player would draw, they instead exile the top card of their library and they can play that this turn. And yes, the card gets exiled face up. Good game knowledge. But this card turns out to be a regular draw step for us into further advantage with Prosper, overall resulting in just a net positive in our favor. Next, I want to talk about 2 cards from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set. Now, Ixalan revisited Discover and the Discover mechanic, and Prosper loves discovering, if you didn't already know that, especially with the brand new include Shamil of the Inner Sun. Now, I'm tempted to put this card in basically every single deck just because of how much value it generates for us, but in Prosper, it's just silly. Sure, Discover for 5, which we likely manipulated the top deck anyway, casting a card for 5 CMC for free, which also, by the way, nets us a treasure. And if you haven't already seen the deck list, likely means that we just get to keep ahead in the value department the turn that we play it. It's going to be so difficult for our opponents to keep up, let alone get ahead with this guy on the board. And a sleeper pick that I think has the potential to be extremely good in any red deck with Impulse Draw is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Now, I don't care so much about the front side, which is actually much easier to activate than you may otherwise think. We are looking more so at the back side, which reads, whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by Tekulan, the Searing Rift, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Now, we just reviewed how good discovering is, but this card on the front side also lets us reset our hand and is honestly just another card I'm excited seeing put into exile with Prosper. Just give this card a try. Now, I don't need to talk about every card that I've included, but I do want to talk about some non-bows that you should be avoiding. All of these on screen have a similar problem, which is they don't get the value unless they are cast from our hand. And in the event they end up in exile with Prosper, or any other effect for that matter, we're sad. Why run something that can miss as hard as these cards do? I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Revel in Riches, which is, of course, an auto-include for many of you with a treasure-themed deck. And if that person is you, then go right ahead and include it. I tend to dislike cards that simply say you win the game, but if you wanted, go ahead and swap this card in. Finally, this is more of a clerical thing than an actual issue or a non-bow with Prosper, but I decided to not include Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse in either version of my deck. And why is that? Well, in a 2-color commander deck, we don't always need the fixing that these offer, and moreover, if they end up in exile, it means that, however, yes, we do get a treasure from Prosper when played, the land that we subsequently get from the Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse comes into play tapped. And if we already have Prosper out on the battlefield, we don't really need the fixing anymore. The treasure Prosper generates fixes us and allows us to play cards with heavier pip requirements in the first place. And it's not wrong to include them, but I think you'll find that in niche situations, it actually takes away from the deck's explosive potential. That pretty well sums up the structure and function of the Cutthroat Prosper deck, but what if you wanted a more budget experience? Now, I love building budget commander because it forces creativity onto us. And admittedly, the deck still comes in around $150 US, but that's much better when compared to our other deck list, which is closer to 500. I love seeing the unique includes that come in here, such as Vat of Rebirth or Invasion of Kaldheim, which just seem really great to include for only 25 cents a piece. Or a card that I love, Elderbrain, which does in fact exile cards and fits in the theme of stealing from our opponents. Our win cons in this version did shift somewhat to include more pinging, aka when our treasures enter or leave, our opponents take damage. But luckily, that was only a few of our cards. One thing that I couldn't cut, however, were the rituals. I left all of these because I felt that they were so important to the heart of our commander and strategy, it would have been a disservice to remove them. You could certainly pare down the deck price even further, but then you start to get into that niche territory where the deck may start to really show its weaknesses. I think that either deck version is viable, it just depends on how badly you want to spank your friends. If this video inspired you to try out Prosper or helped you just better understand the commander, then please subscribe. It means a lot to me knowing that what I do is helpful and useful to others. You can also check out my other videos. I'm starting to build a bit of a back catalog, and with more videos coming out all the time, you can of course look forward to those future uploads. And I know that I keep mentioning it, but over the next few months, I have videos planned that are going to be very unique. Not just a box standard deck tech, and moreover, something that you can only get on this channel. I'm very excited for everyone to see the progress as I continue to improve simple videos like this one, but also see what we're capable of accomplishing on this journey together. Support my addiction so I can continue supporting your addiction. I've been Kyle, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.